My name is Keith, and from the time I was about 4 years old, I was interested in being a part of the entertainment business. And I've done many things throughout that time, from singing in bands, writing music, hosting television shows, everything involved in the professional wrestling business. And I've written comic books, done a lot of things, and almost all of those things failed in some way or another. But I still kept going. I still wanted to continue to create. And there's just something in me that drives me to create. And I started thinking, well, what is it that drives anyone to create? And that's going to be the point of this podcast. We're going to talk to people from all aspects of the entertainment industry. We're going to find out what made them interested in creating art, and why, when faced with success, when faced with failure, the ups and downs of life and life in the entertainment business, they continue to create. So, and hopefully we'll have some good and interesting conversations along the way that you'll be interested in hearing. So tune in to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host Keith, and our guest this week is an animator. He's done some really cool stuff, and we're going to talk to him about it. Mr. John Lumgair, all the way from London, England. Welcome to the show.
Here. Thank you.
I'm happy to have you. So before we get into like the real discussion, the meat and potatoes of it, you can see some of your artwork in the background for the people who are going to be watching this on video. You have a really diverse art style. Like, some of it's sort of traditional, and then some of it looks almost 3D. Like, I noticed that when I was looking into your work that you can kind of change it up, and that's really cool. Like, when did you realize that you could do that sort of thing? You know, that you could draw, and you could draw in so many different styles and draw well.
So that's a really interesting question, because actually anybody who has any sense will advise artists to just hone one style, do that really well. You get known for that style and you'll get loads of work. And I haven't done that, and that's probably not been financially sensible. But I think, so one of the things that I've always thought with the work that I do for different clients and different people, that the story should lead the visual style of the show, or visual style of what I'm doing. And so I'd be like, oh, I think it should feel like that. And then I just start drawing and then get a feel for it and do research. And so I guess most artists can do things in lots of different styles. But most are more sensible than me.
Gotcha. Yeah. Because I'm really into comic books, and I have been for a while. And George Perez was my favorite artist, and you can always tell that George Perez drew it, or you can tell like that George Perez was someone who was influenced by George Perez. And pretty much every comic artist, at least, has their own specific style. And I don't know animators as well, but I know studios have styles. Like, there's definitely a Hanna-Barbera style. There's a Filmation style. Because I'm a big 80s geek, so I know all that old animation. But yeah, have you worked for different studios, or is that kind of what helped with the diversity? Or
I think I'm what some people call high on openness. So I just love art books. I love seeing things. I walk around the streets, go to galleries. I just see things. I was like, that's a cool style. Because most of the places I've worked has just been freelance. And so I've been just running my own company. And sometimes it is a necessity because a client has a particular brand look and you want to mimic that. But yeah, I think I just pick it up from my desire to just do new things.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to ask you about that before we got into anything else. But backing it up a little bit, when did you first realize that you wanted to be an artist, that you wanted to participate in creating things?
So almost as long as I can remember, because as a child I loved drawing. As a child I loved watching TV. I really loved watching TV. And I would watch shows, particularly animated shows. I'd watch the credits. I'd go to the library. I'd want to find out who are these people? How did they make this? What was going? And so I guess it's that obsession and just loving creating things. I've got three brothers, and we would always be trying to find out ways to make stories and um yeah, have fun creative projects we'd create. So I think it's always been there.
Awesome. Awesome. So once you figured out that that was the path that you wanted to take, like that this was something that you could actually do as a career, as a possible career goal or a life goal, or that what steps did you take to get there, to get
Yeah,
started?
yeah, I I did the classic doing art at school, which is fairly that's the obvious road. I went to art school. I studied animation. And I don't now this is where I don't actually advise particularly going to study animation. I mean, do it if you like, but my experience was there was a lot of what I call kind of pseudo academic stuff, and I think what would there's now you can learn off like Disney animators online. Like
Sure.
you can learn from the best, and without spending a fortune, you can learn from brilliant people online. But I went down that route, which was the only route kind of available, I guess. And then on graduation, I started trying to get jobs, got lots of rejection, lots. You get rejection sometimes because it's like a relative of the person who was doing the job interview got the job.
Right.
Sometimes you get rejection. One job I got rejected for because they worked out because you have to work so late into the night that they would get people a cab home. They worked out where I lived would cost them more on cab journeys. Um, and then some jobs I probably didn't get because I wasn't very good. Probably a lot of jobs I didn't get because I wasn't very good or didn't fit the vibe of what they were looking for.
Right.
But eventually started getting bits of freelance work, and then a a group of us thought, well, why don't we pull together, start a company, and we can pitch for large jobs. We can do more interesting things. So that's the route we went.
Yeah, and it seems like animation houses are very interesting. Like there's a lot of camaraderie, and then at the same time it's like you look at what the other person's drawing and you want to top that. You want to, so you kind of push each other to be better,
Yes.
and encourage each other at the same time. I mean, it seems like a really cool environment. Like I said, I'm into old school animation, so I've watched a lot of documentaries
Mm.
about different animation houses and stuff, and the way that they just all kind of will come together. Same with comic books, honestly. Like the early days of comic book publishing, they'd all sit together in a room, and draw the pictures. Um, I don't think it's really like that anymore, but
But
but that's
I think there's a more positive thing amongst I think people who enjoy drawing are slightly weird people. And I'm an exception in that I'm extroverted. Most are introverted. And most people, all they want to do is just draw. And they'd rather not have to pay any bills. They'd rather not have to do anything other than just draw. And they love it because it's cool. So they see someone else doing something and they're inspired. And I think when I compare to film, which our company does film and animation, the
sure.
film guys are a lot more zero sum game, a lot more competitive in a way, where I think they're just I've 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 met a lot of animators and very few of them aren't really nice people.
Right, right, sure. My son is really into drawing. He's 9, and
Mm.
he's gotten really, really good. So the other day we were at a used bookstore, and they had drawing comics the Marvel way for three
Oh yeah,
dollars.
yeah.
So I bought it for him, and I'm just like, buddy, even if you don't want to do this right now, this will help you later. Like, just look at it, at some point. And he flipped through it real quick and was like, "Oh, this is easy. I can do all of this." And I was like, "Well, then go do
Do
it."
it then.
Yeah. It's just cool, like how that spark, like you were saying, can just be there from the beginning. Because I mean, he's drawn for as long as I can remember. When he was 2, he drew a bird on a wall in our apartment, and I said, "What is that?" And he goes, "It's a bird," and it was very clearly a bird. I just wanted to make sure he didn't do it by accident. But yeah, he drew a
That's so
bird on the wall
cool.
when he was 2. Yeah, it's very awesome. And I'm not one of those parents who's like, oh, don't draw on the wall. Like, I'll clean it up. Draw on the wall if you have to. If that's what. Yeah. So that's kind of yeah. Um. So do you also do you write uh the movies, the animation that you do as well, or are you strictly an artist? Like,
No, I do some writing. So the bulk of our work is for clients that pay us, and usually they send us a bad script and we'll turn it into a better script, and it's a bit collaborative. I work with my brother, and he's written 9 feature films, and he's pushing them out in different directions. Where yeah, I've got stuff that I've written that's just mine. I mean, there's a project that I'm working on called Jazz Cow, and I've written it, but then I've had others write lots of different things, and now I've got a writer on board who's a writer and doesn't
sure.
do silly pictures too. So um I wouldn't comfortably describe myself as a writer, but I do a lot of writing.
Okay. So, is it more ideas and concepts, or are you like, do you come up with the dialogue and all that kind of good stuff too, or how does that work for you?
So more ideas and concepts. I do some dialogue. I don't. It's hard to know how good you are at a lot of these things, but I don't feel I'm brilliant at a lot of that. Although a lot of the client stuff that comes through, I'm more like put a red line through loads of stuff and then just a few words kind of thing to tighten it up. Usually people are just too
Sure,
long-winded.
sure. So what do you remember what your first job was, as far as your first commercial job that you actually,
Hmm.
turned into?
So the first, now I think I must have done something at university on the side with my housemates, but I can't remember specific on that. But I bet I did. But the
Yeah.
first I did after I graduated was it was more live action, and we had this guy I met, and he was a bit of a kind of hippie guy, and he was just like, "Yeah, I've got this money from the European Union, and we're going to do this film about young people and giving them opportunities." And he was paying me like pittance to do this, but I'm like, I need work. Yeah, I'll do this. So
Right.
get a shoot a film, shoot a friend, like uh, doing stuff, and then did some various effects on it, and did the thing, and then trying to get paid at the end of the day was a nightmare. And then trying to meet the guy, and he was just like he on the phone. He used to always say, "Cool, cool, wicked, wicked, yeah, yeah." And it was, so I just called him the cool, cool, wicked, wicked, yeah, yeah, man, because that's what
Right.
he would say in every. And then eventually, the way I got the money was I traveled to another part of London, and it was this room that was just full of smoke,
Uh,
of marijuana, and
yeah.
all these guys just laying on the floor, and it was all a bit weird. And then he said, because he said, "I'll meet me here," and I was walking this place. I thought the police are going to bust this. This is not good. And then this guy comes up to me and goes, "You see that guy there? He's the original Maharaja." And I was like, "Okay." And I found the guy, and he's like, and he then said, "Look, jump in my car. I'll drive you to the place and we'll get the money." And I was just like, "Oh man, is he high? What's going on?" Anyway,
Right.
I did it. Went in the car, and he and then he did just give me the money, and it was all fine. But I was just like, "This is so
All's,
dodgy."
all's well that ends well, I guess. Right.
And I look back, and it was like, no, the money was so low. It was just
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah. So I actually something just popped into my head, and I actually want to ask you about it now. So being in England, in America, there was when I was growing up anyway, there was some British cartoons that came over,
Hmm.
and two of them that I remember still to this day and love, and have actually rewatched as an adult were Banana Man and Danger Mouse. And
Yes.
they were legitimately two of the greatest cartoons in the history of animation, as far as I'm concerned. Um, what sort of stuff did you see growing up that influenced you?
Well, I love Danger Mouse,
Yeah,
and Danger Mouse, particularly its humor. It's genuinely funny. It's
yeah,
really, really, and
yeah.
I guess I've been influenced because it's actually not that high budget either. They cut corners, but they did it so well.
Yeah.
Um, so and I love Banana Man, but I just don't think it's at the level of Danger Mouse. I
Sure, and
watch,
the cartoons were shorter too, so he didn't get as much time to, you know.
yeah,
But
um, but yeah, British cartoons. Um, do you know? I don't even know what half the stuff was British or not. I know that Super
oh,
Ted
okay.
was because I was on a
Oh,
podcast and it was talking about.
I love
mm,
Super Ted.
What's
I
that?
didn't realize. I love Super Ted. I didn't realize Super Ted was British. I love Super
Yes,
Ted.
it's from Wales.
Oh, awesome.
And but you wouldn't know from the soundtrack. And I was on
Right,
this
sure.
show talking about the soundtrack, so I was like, oh yeah, this is actually a Welsh show, which kind of blew my mind because the soundtrack
Right.
really isn't Welsh. Um, but I'm just trying to think. Yeah, most of the time I didn't know what was British or what was not.
Sure.
Um, yeah, I mean, I was thinking quite a lot about a French Japanese co-production called Mysterious Cities of Gold.
Okay. Okay.
Um, recently, and I realized that I rewatched it in lockdown. I realized it subconsciously influenced me a lot more than I could imagine because so many of the scenes were vivid in my mind,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think it influenced me more until re-seen it. I didn't realize what an influence it had had on me.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's funny about Super Ted. See that was the kind of thing I guess that I was looking for because uh, I loved Super Ted. I had no idea that it came from England. So that's very cool.
Mm.
Um, so once you got through that first job, I guess, um, what would you say was your first? Have you had any like regular gigs, or has it all just been kind of one-offs and things like that?
Mainly one-offs. We've had some regular
Okay,
gigs that were we I mean our version of a regular gig is usually we work for a client, we do something for them, and then a year later they come to us and say that was really good, can you do something else? And
sure.
then 3 years later they come back to us. um we have had some clients that have been regular gigs, but not for that long.
Okay,
um yeah, just small things.
okay. So
It'd be good though.
sure, yeah. So is Jazz Cow, is that going to be a series or is that just is it a movie? Like what exactly is Jazz Cow?
Yeah, so Jazz Cow, we want to be an animated series in the kind of in the space where The Simpsons is. Um, that's that's our aspiration. But at the moment, I'm trying to kickstart the pilot episode because
Gotcha.
um can't afford to make anything. Well, can't even afford to make the pilot, which is why I'm trying to get the money for it. But yeah, um, and then because we were gonna the traditional way with animation is you pitch it to a
Mm,
studio, whatever, and then you or a streaming service broadcaster, and then you get the money, you make it. But what we found is a guy took it around streaming services and they're saying they're only taking stuff that's on based on books or games. And so we th- we said, well, what do we do now? He said, you could write a book. I was like, okay. But then it then he said, "Well, why don't you try to get money to make a pilot?" And I was like, "That's crazy," and I'm now doing it.
Yeah. But then you decided to do it, or
Yeah.
yeah, right on. Dang. Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Like if you did any kind of like graphic novels or anything like that, or is it strictly animation projects?
So there is a graphic novel that I've written the story for, done some of the character designs, mapped out pretty much every scene, and it's sat on a hard drive, and I've been too busy to do anything with it. But my hope is when things settle down to do that, just because I'd love to work on something where I'm not having to get finance from anyone. I'm not having to call anyone up to ask them to do anything. I'm not having to chase anyone. I can just sit there, draw, and I've got no one to rely on. That
Sure.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I mean the way that the internet is now basically like in the back in the day, if you were an independent artist, you kind of had to get in with Diamond or a big distributor in order
Mm,
for anybody to see your books. But now, you can get on Kickstarter and literally get hundreds of thousands of people, possibly, potentially, to to buy your book, and you could just distribute it on your own. Um,
yeah, and
there's,
yeah, I was going to
uh,
say that
yeah,
I've supported a few Kickstarters that have been
yeah,
like
me
that,
too.
and
Yeah,
it's great. You feel part of it.
absolutely. Yeah, it's and the thing is too, like mainstream comics. I mean, I'll always love them. I'll always have a place for Fantastic Four and Batman. I mean, just they're there. But I haven't read mainstream comics in forever. But supporting these quirky like independent comics, it's just fun,
Mm,
and most of the time you end up with something really cool to read. So you know, um,
yeah, yeah, I love it.
yeah, for sure. So you're gonna launch a Kickstarter for Jazz Cow, or what are the plans for that?
Yeah, so on the 25th of September, we're launching our Kickstarter, and it's nerve-wracking because we're getting very close to that date,
Yeah,
and we've got no idea if anyone will support us.
right, right,
But you've got to try
right.
these things. And I
Yeah,
have positive meeting, positive meeting, positive meeting that leads to lots of work to do. And then you email people and they don't get back to your emails, and you're like, oh, what's going on there? And yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think one of the hardest things when you're doing a series or a movie, like something that you can't necessarily hold in your hand, is the perks.
mm,
Um, I have a friend who's an independent filmmaker, and a lot of his perks are you get a credit in the movie, which is cool for a lot of people, but then how much can someone actually give you for that,
yeah.
I mean, but then he'll also do like souvenirs, and with animation you don't even really have that option. Like you can't give a set souvenir because
But
there's
we can
yeah,
do
that's
so what I'm doing an art of book. I'm
yeah.
doing an album, which is the thing that's
Oh, cool.
giving me most excitement and most stress at the moment.
Yeah,
It's gonna do you get to see the film, and here's all the behind the scenes little films and clips thing. But people do toys. I am thinking of doing, but releasing that later in the campaign, a toy or something, because that could be fun, but
yeah,
it's slightly outside of my area of expertise, and I just thought I cannot start with. I need to get the thing rolling and be confident with the things I've got rather than jump into too many things I don't know anything about.
right. Sure, sure. Yeah, that was going to be the next part of my question was what actually are you guys considering for perks? So, um have you
But I
thought
want to give
about
a sketchbook actually. One of the things
Oh, sure.
is because I will have filled it by the end, so it'll be
That's cool.
completely unique.
That's really cool. Have you thought about maybe 3D printing? Cuz
Yes, I I've got a friend that does it, and I tried to meet him, and I think he went to a funeral that day or something. and I want to see the quality and do some tests,
Sure.
because if I can do some really nice tests and they work, then I could add them. But
Right.
I haven't got time to do that before we launch. But yeah, I've been wondering we could do that midway, and it'd be a
Yeah,
nice
because
thing.
I've actually seen some 3D printed stuff of like castles and dragons and stuff like that that are really, really cool, honestly. Like, um,
Yeah,
and I can see that being a nice collectible. Um,
I saw some amazing things at a Comic-Con that I
sure.
visited, and they were 3D printed, but they looked outstanding.
Right.
Um,
Right. So, with the name Jazz Cow, I'm gonna assume there's some sort of a music tie-in. Is that
that's true. So
okay?
he plays jazz, and he's
Right.
the only animal within this world. And so Jazz Cow and the band um, are the core of the resistance movement to algorithms. So it's we're working really hard on a great jazz soundtrack, and we're getting some brilliant people on board. But ultimately, the show is um, about man versus machine in a way.
Oh,
It's it's the algorithm is the enemy, and so I was saying that you don't have to love offices or working in an office to love the office, but it
right.
has to be credibly an office. And you go through any sitcom, you don't
Yeah.
need to know anything about nuclear power or to enjoy The Simpsons.
Right.
But
Sure.
in Jazz Cow, we want the jazz to be really, really good, and so we've got some great musicians on board. Um, so yeah, that's exciting, because I don't know if you're aware, in the UK, the
Yeah.
jazz scene is kind of exploding at the moment,
Oh,
and
awesome! I did not know that.
yeah, it's amazing. It's kind of come. It hasn't come out of nowhere, but it feels like it's come out of nowhere, because you've got um bands that are getting they're just gone mainstream. And I was at a jazz festival, and it was just packed. You just couldn't get anywhere, like near the stage, which was kind of annoying, because I wanted to take photographs of some of the musicians we were working with.
Sure. Sure.
um but yeah, so there's it's quite nice to be able to tap into that. And tonight I'm going to see one of the musicians live. So
That's
that's
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, I've actually I've been to a lot of concerts. I've the only jazz guy who I've ever seen live was a piano guy named Johnny Russo, and he's incredible, honestly. Like I love watching him play and sing and stuff. But and I love listening to like older jazz. I'm a big fan of like vocal jazz, like Billie Holiday, obviously, you
Mm,
know, and things like that. But I also like Medisky, Martin and Wood, and things like that. It's I just thought about something that's kind of odd. It's not jazz, but I was listening to IQ before the interview. Um,
mm,
People in America don't know who IQ is. I stumbled on their stuff at a used CD place. I got like six of their CDs, and it's really good. I mean, I
mm.
if you like progressive rock with kind of a jazz influence, I mean, I really like
Yeah,
them.
I mean, there's all the progressive stuff has a big jazz influence. I
Yeah,
think it can't
absolutely.
can't
Yeah,
fail
for
to.
sure. Yeah, it's
That's really
definitely a
cool.
big part of it. Yeah, I mean, I didn't plan it. I just was like, "Oh, I'm gonna listen to some IQ while I'm laying down, and then because I don't understand time zones, I ended
No,
up,
it's all the time zones stuff was totally and utterly my fault.
uh,
I just yeah, I put things in the diary wrong.
yeah,
I don't.
well, I can't remember if I specified either, you know, so I always assume that like people will know that I'm in the United States and
No,
they'll just
you did
know,
specify. You were good. You
oh,
specified
I did
Eastern Standard
specify.
Time.
All
Yeah,
right. Well, hey,
it was completely and utterly me.
okay. I
Because I
felt
put
so
I
bad,
No,
but
no, don't feel bad. It
all
was
right, cool.
completely and utterly my mistake,
Ah,
and
no
it's
worries.
because I typed it into my calendar and I didn't
Yeah.
adjust the time.
Right, right.
Not
Yeah,
enough sleep. That's the problem.
oh, yeah, me too. I work an overnight shift, which is why we usually do it later in the afternoon. but here we are at 11 in the morning my time. So, um,
Nice.
yeah. But um, what else did I want to ask you? Oh, yeah. So, has there been any other like pet project type things, like things that you've been really proud of? Obviously, Jazz Cow is kind of what you're getting behind right
Mm.
now, and I mean, it seems like something that you have a passion for. But has there been any other projects that you've worked on that really spoke to you?
Um, I mean, there's been quite a few projects that I've loved doing, but this is very much the big one. I've
Yeah,
got a book of all sorts of ideas that I want to make that are kind of passion projects that don't exist in the real world in any shape or form. They are literally just in a book that I could do. Um, so yeah, most of the stuff I do is just for clients. So
yeah,
but some of it is just like, yeah, you do it to pay the rent. But some of it I really enjoy. Um, we did for a publisher, we did a clip from one of their kids' Bible, and
hmm,
that was really fun to work on because the character it was just breathing life into the characters, and we had a really good voiceover, and it was just nice to tell that little story. And I was like, oh yeah, this would be a great client to do the whole Bible. And they went with
right.
they did it internally and they messed it up. But that's um, I was quite
Wow.
proud of the job we did. I think we did a really good job, and it was a really good team.
Okay. So what is it like then? I guess going from working for clients to doing this project was essentially your baby. I mean, this is your thing. So how does that feel like moving into that transition?
Well, it's funny because I'm still doing work for clients. In fact, there's two emails that I've received today that I need to reply to that I will do because
Okay.
I'm a good person. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to keep that rolling because this isn't paying any of my rent until we've got any success.
Yeah.
But I love the idea that if I could be in a position where I'm paid just to do what I want, that would be amazing. I'd really enjoy that.
Sure. Sure. So what are your plans as far as platforms and stuff? Are you gonna uh once you get the financing, because I'm gonna speak it that you are going to get the financing and this is gonna
Thank you.
happen. So you're welcome. So once you get the financing, do you plan to maybe try to pitch it to like Tubi and some of the streaming channels and things like that? Or
Yeah, so
yeah,
what
what's your idea?
the guy that went and pitched it before, I'll I'll see if he is, I'm sure he is willing to have another go with because
Yeah,
he said, yeah, if you get a pilot, we can we can pitch that. I'm also going to do animation festivals. I'll be in a position to knock on more doors, so I think I'm just going to be quite bold and just contact people and say, look, we've got this. Can I have a
awesome.
meeting? And just see where it goes. But I see it I see it in my head becoming a series on a streaming service.
Sure, sure. I mean, honestly, there's so many streaming services now that support independent filmmakers. Like that's their whole concept. Um,
Mm,
I know from my friend who makes independent movies, independent films. He got his films. Um, even Amazon has some stuff that's dedicated to getting independent films put on their streaming service. So it's out there. You know what I mean? You can definitely if it's quality, you can definitely
yeah,
get it seen. So that's
yeah.
that's kind of the exciting thing about streaming and about this whole new world that we have. Um,
And I
it's
think
it
it's going to get more interesting because
yeah,
all these companies are in a lot of financial trouble.
right,
And I think they've gone crazy in doing these multi-million pound productions as their kind of,
right, right.
and I think the future is going to be more small, not tiny, but smaller productions.
Yeah,
Um, but I might be
Um,
wrong.
well, we just had a guy on who was one of the executive producers of The Wrestler, and he was saying, he would rather see a small independent film where he actually feels something, like something that
Mm,
actually connects with him. Um, a lot of these, and I mean, I like blockbusters as much as the next person, I suppose. Um, but I'm kind of like that. Like I like quiet movies sometimes. I like to watch something that I feel like someone actually put some thought into and put some heart into. You don't always feel like that when you're watching like the latest release from Warner Brothers Studios.
yeah,
It's just yeah. So
and I
oh,
think it's risk. One of those films is risky, but if you think a lot of them,
yeah,
your risk goes down
right,
ultimately. Um,
exactly.
and that you do one of those big tentpole movies and it fails, you've just
Mhm.
thrown all that money away. So
Right, right. I mean, if you think about it, like a studio back in the '80s, like New Line, which wasn't they were an independent studio, and then they hit on Nightmare on Elm Street, or
mm,
whatever. It blew up and became. I mean, from my understanding, they're still sort of an independent studio, but they became like the biggest independent studio, and that kind of thing can happen, and they don't, you don't put whereas like the latest Avengers movie or whatever, if it's not $1 billion movie, it's over. It failed and they have to reboot.
yeah,
It's yeah. So
yeah, they're
yeah,
risking so much, and
yeah,
their
for sure.
strategy is nobody in the world can create something like this apart from us.
Yeah,
Therefore, we can compete and win against the whole world. But I think people get tired. This is Aristotle talked about how in storytelling, the the one the kind of I can't remember the word used, but it's effectively special effects.
yeah,
Marvel, I think it was. No, it wasn't Marvel. Anyway, the big
yeah,
showy thing.
yeah.
It's the weakest element of storytelling, and that's what
Right.
they've doubled down on.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so when I watch movies, one of my kind of grades, movies, TV shows, animation, anything, honestly, um, of whether or not it's good is if it elicits an emotion from me.
Yes.
Um, like if it makes me laugh out loud, or if it makes me cry, or if it makes me sympathize. Um,
Yeah.
and with those giant blockbuster movies, it's hard sometimes. It's hard to get that human connection. So I don't know. I enjoy independent films as long as they're well done because I think that there's more care put into them sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously a lot more bad independent films because
Oh, of
there's more
course.
made.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And you want that human connection. You want to be
Yeah.
moved. Why else
Yeah.
are you going to the cinema?
Right. 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 Well, some people go because they want to see cars drive fast and things blow up. But I
But
mean,
that
there is that crowd. But but
that's wears thin, right?
yeah,
It's
I
fine
would
for a
think
bit,
so.
but
Yeah, I would think so. I just remember like when people were going crazy over the Fast and the Furious movies when they first came out, and I couldn't watch them. Um, but then Gone in 60 Seconds, Nicolas Cage and Angelina Jolie, like it's a similar kind of a movie, but their relationship in the movie anchors it. I mean, and it was
yeah,
actually a pretty good movie in my opinion. Like I remember they came out around the same time, and there was a lot more hype for Fast and the Furious, but I actually enjoyed Gone in 60 Seconds and wish that had become a franchise. You
I've not
know?
I've not actually seen that, but yeah,
Okay.
I think but it the yeah, I agree with your point.
Yeah. Um, so I guess getting back to uh to your stuff here. What exactly are the plot points of Jazz Cow? I mean, you kind of talked about him being in a jazz band and the battle against the algorithm, but I mean, can you sort of embellish the
Right.
story a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So Jazz Cow, he's if you think of him as like a Humphrey Bogart kind of character, He he lives in this kind of a bit like Vichy France. It's this kind of space that's semi-autonomous, and you've got the world of Pop World, which is trying to rule them.
Okay.
And him and they just want to play jazz and live a life and eat slow food and play chess and just hang out as friends. And that's just not an option because you've got this opposing world of Pop World, which is trying to make everything cheaper, cleaner, more efficient, all of this stuff. And you've got your thumbprint and that can do everything. That's the world that they're being offered, but they would rather an inconvenient mess of a world where they can just do their thing. And so that's the setup. And our pilot is about Jazz Cow saxophone gets stolen and it gets put in a top safe deposit box, which is uncrackable, using the latest technology. But they do a heist to get back the saxophone. So
That sounds so much fun. Like
hopefully,
honestly, it sounds so much fun. Um, cool. Yeah, I love heists. I love mysteries, so that's awesome. And I'm also into the whole idea of technological overlords and trying to navigate that. So
yeah, because
that's
they've all
awesome.
got us addicted, and I think that's the thing that when we're all bent over on our phones, just
Sure,
there's
sure.
something just dehumanizing about what it's done to us. And
Yeah,
so it's a cow teaching us to be human in a way.
that's awesome though. Yeah, I mean, you know what's funny? Like I'm 50 years old, and I my phone is in my hand constantly. Like I
Yeah,
pretty much never let it go. And like they say, Gen X, because like we're more adaptive to technology than people a little bit older than us because we were kind of there for all of it, like as it was getting introduced.
yeah.
Um, and that makes perfect sense to me. Like I have basically been conditioned to embrace technology my entire life, like, hey, we've got records. No, now we have, well, 8 tracks first, honestly. And then, records, and then we have cassettes, and then we have CDs, and now we have streaming, and it's right there. You can just get it whenever you want. And it's just
Mm.
yeah, all of that has gone on my entire existence. Like you like watching movies at the movie theater? How about HBO and video cassettes where you can watch it right at your house,
Yeah.
So I've been taught that technology is comfort, and I think about that sometimes. Um,
Well, I
how I'm
think,
a little disconnected because of it, but
but I think what it's done is it's like the frog in boiling water analogy that I'm a bit younger, but not a huge amount younger, and
yeah,
I'm kind of on the same. And technology was making stuff better, and then it got to a point where it stopped making stuff better.
right,
Like, do you remember every time you get a software upgrade, you were like, "Oh wow, this is great! It's got this new feature." And
yeah,
now you're like, every time you're going to do a software upgrade, you're like, "Is this going to be better or is this going to be worse?"
right. Like I'm always worried now that when there's an update, it's going to crash my phone.
Yeah,
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 I'll always.
and all these things, and then they keep adding stuff in terms and conditions. Like now you agree that your all your conversations can be used and harvested,
Right,
and then
right.
used to sell you advertising and tip off the government if you're saying something that we don't
Yeah,
like or whatever. And
yeah,
all of that, it never used to be like that. All the upgrades, you may think, oh yeah, cassette tape wasn't a great advance on records and things like that. But there was generally a kind of trajectory of
yeah. I mean, it was
things
portable.
being,
I think that was the
yeah,
big thing, was going to cassettes. You could put them in your car, and I mean, 8 tracks played in your car, but 8 tracks you had to listen to them all the way through before you could listen to the other side. So it's kind of ridiculous, But cassette tapes were. I remember like being excited about
yeah,
being able to get a Walkman and a boombox and have a cassette tape, like
because
it's a big
it is
deal.
the portability. Um,
Yeah.
but all these things, they were giving you something more. And I feel like in the last 10 years, technology has come along and it's just started taking stuff away.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, legitimately, is music on streaming better? I mean, it's cool that you get to listen to whatever you want. I mean, like I was listening to IQ this morning just because I happen to feel like listening to them. That
Mm,
is probably not something, and I could listen to 7 hours of IQ if I felt like it. Um, but it's coming out of this little tiny speaker,
yeah.
it doesn't have the full sound that it would if I was playing it on a stereo, I mean, it's just
Well, I walk around with my big headphones because of that,
awesome. Sure.
um, and not these little things that people put in their ears,
Yeah.
because you get better sound. Also,
Yeah.
I have the wrong shaped ears anyway.
Yeah. My ears are kind of crazy shaped as well. So it's genetics. You can't fight them,
You can't.
unfortunately.
Yeah, one of my brothers says, "Oh, I've got the same problem as you," and
Yeah.
but then he was talking about some earpod things, and he was saying these actually work with my ears.
Nice, nice. Yeah, with me, like the over the ear kind, don't work for me because I mean, I'll show you. Like I have pretty large ears that are like kind of disconnected from my head, like they protrude off my head. So if I have something that's meant for people with regular size ears, they just pop right off. Like they don't fit. So it's, I didn't know the podcast was going to go in this direction, but hey,
Who knows? Who
yeah,
knows
you
where
never
anything could
know
go?
once you get started, right? Um, so what, given like, it honestly sounds like you've had a, a relatively smooth, I mean, you're not making millions of dollars, but it sounds like you're getting pretty good work and you work with your friends and your brother. But has there been any challenges like where you kind of felt like maybe I shouldn't be doing this, maybe I should go get a job at a bank or something? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, a
okay,
lot.
okay,
So when we launched the company, we did two jobs back to back, and they came in really easily, and we thought we're good at this. And then we're like, how do we get more work? And nothing came. And we struggled for years just trying to get work from anything and everything, doing weird jobs. And over time, people have seen our work and said, who did that for you? And we've slowly grown. But we'd never feel like we're out of the woods. We still feel like we're always struggling. And then um COVID came, and COVID
right,
was everything just went dead, and that was quite scary. And then when things opened up, we were so busy, it was incredible, and then it just stopped, and we didn't have anything for ages.
yeah,
And at that point, I was like, "How are we going to survive? This is ridiculously tough." And then we had two or three, four jobs back to back just at the end of that year. And had we not had that, I don't know how we were going to get through
right,
it. So
yeah,
it's funny how everything always comes at the same time.
yeah, for sure, definitely. I would have thought like working in animation that there might have been a call for work during COVID because people needed
Yeah,
entertainment. We were all stuck at our houses, so
yeah, we were hoping that. I think
it just
what
didn't work out
happened
that
is
way.
not for us. I
Okay.
think people were nervous to just spend any money because they didn't know what was going to
Mhm.
happen.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but I'm sure for some animators it worked out really well. They're probably smarter than me and able to
Hmm.
use the opportunity better to their advantage.
Sure.
I I stood by the window looking like a sad dog,
Oh,
and then I
man.
kept doing things to try to get work,
Uh,
and then it wouldn't work. And then I was like, oh, I'm gonna go. It's opened up. I'm gonna go to this event. I'm gonna network there. I'm gonna put, and then they would lock down again, and it wouldn't happen.
right. Yeah, because there were a few false starts for sure. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I was just not I was not the smartest person to handle it. I know some people
right,
managed to pivot and do really well out of it, and
right.
I was not one of them.
Yeah,
Um,
I went and got a job in a factory, which wasn't ideal, but paid well, and they were not going to shut it down, because they
that's good.
needed it was an air condition, well, an air compressor plant. So I mean, they needed refrigeration,
Mm.
for everything they were doing. So I mean, it was like
Yeah,
it
you
was a
can't.
good gig to pick up, for that time. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely wasn't. I wasn't like, woo, dream job, but yeah,
Yes.
that,
Sometimes though, yeah, yeah. During this period, I've done all sorts of little temping jobs here and there,
sure,
and it's funny. None of those jobs, when you're doing those jobs, you're desperate to get home to work on other stuff.
right,
But you're like, wow, I'm getting paid. I get paid to just turn up, do my hours, go home. That's
right,
cool.
yeah, yeah. Because with a job like that, I mean, you can kind of turn off. Like once you learn it, it can just become automatic, and
Yeah.
a factory job at the very least. You know what I mean? It's not. Uh, it's the same thing every day. Taking this part off, putting this part on. It's not really. but
Yeah.
yeah. It's funny when you were talking about looking out the window like a sad dog, staring out the window like a sad dog. It reminded me of the video for Mad World by Tears for Fears. Um,
Mm.
because there's someone looking out the window. It's raining, and yeah, it's just made me think of that. Like,
Although it was really sunny, but the government
oh
only allowed
yeah,
us out for 1 hour a day. And
oh
my
man,
wife was like, go out for a second hour. But the
yeah. I
thing is,
mean,
I couldn't work very well because we're in a studio flat and
okay,
she was working and doing social housing. And that was a nightmare because they weren't allowed anybody to sleep on the streets. And
right,
it was really difficult with all the homeless people that didn't actually want to. All these things were happening. And
yeah,
she was on the phone constantly, and I can't work when someone is on the phone in the same room as me. And
right,
so my productivity dropped to zero as well.
yeah. So you couldn't even just sketch some things or whatever, like because
Yeah, it was such an
man,
unproductive time.
that's man. Well, you got through it, so
Yeah, and I really don't have it bad.
yeah,
Like so many people had it really, really bad, and I
right.
I didn't. So I don't want to be too negative about my experience when I compare to most people's.
Yeah, I mean, legitimately though, it was a hard time for everyone. Even if you were doing well, quote unquote, it still wasn't a great time.
Yeah.
Um, so what is it that keeps you creating and keeps you drawing and keeps you putting
Yeah,
stuff out into the world? Like what is it that you think drives you to do that?
I knew you were going to ask me this,
Yeah,
because this is the core question, and
right.
I don't think that I have a choice. I think, like a drug addict or an alcoholic, the first thing they do is they wake up and they want to have a drink or whatever. And when I've been doing normal jobs and I've got a bit more money in my pocket and life is easier, I'm spending my whole time thinking, I want to work on this. It's like a nagging draw that you can't really ignore, or if you try to ignore, you get more and more frustrated. And so I think it's like an addiction.
Ah,
I don't
sure.
think it's negative. Well, it
Right.
is, as in it uses up you end up with no money and struggling in life,
Yeah.
but it creates good things in the world. But I
Yeah.
think it probably uses a similar mechanism in the brain. I don't know, but it's definitely that drive that I have no choice about. It's what I do with that, and I can use it productively or
Yeah.
yeah.
Right on, man. Um, well, I'm glad that you're doing it because I enjoy animation, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you come out with here with Jazz Cow and whatever else you've got cooking. So before we hop off here, I just let people know where they can find you on social media, where they can hire you for jobs if they want to, how to
Yeah.
support Jazz Cow, anything like that.
So for Jazz Cow, jazzcow.co.uk, and you can sign up to the mailing list. and there's a link that goes through to the Kickstarter landing page thing. If you're watching this after the Kickstarter launches, it should just forward there automatically. For social media, search for my name, John Lumgair, Lumgair, or Quirky Motion, QUIRKYMOTION. And my website's quirkymotion.com. So send a message if you want to get in touch, and I will get back to you, as long as it doesn't end up in spam or something and I don't know about it.
Yeah, technology once again.
But if you try one way and it doesn't work, then try another way, and
Sure.
hopefully that would work. I don't see why it wouldn't, but
You never know, though. Yeah.
I was looking at contracts today, so and so then I was realizing, oh, they always put clauses in for things things like that.
Right. All right. Well, John, thank you. This has been fun. This conversation went in a lot of different places, and I hopefully you'll entertain some people and get some people some information about you. And I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, I want to thank my guest, John Lumgair. Please check him out. I want to thank my producer, Tyler Martin, and ME Studios. He's the guy who's going to make all this look and sound good once we're done and I ship it over to him. So, and I want to thank everybody who's listening. We are growing. I'm pretty happy with how things are going on Spotify for us, and hopefully we can just keep on getting more listeners. And along those lines, please tune in next week for another episode of the Most Excellent Entertainment Podcast.